Sarah,
Melissa,
what are we doing today?
we're chatting about The Hobbit with Andy Morrison.
Let's go.
Andy, it's really good to have you with us. I feel like this was like a few months in the making. We've been kind of talking about this for a bit. And so I obviously know you, but I feel like we should get started with a bit of an introduction since many of our listeners, including Melissa at this point, don't know you. So please, Andy, can you tell us about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
Okay. Yeah. Andy Morrison. Hi, Melissa.
Nice to meet you.
I own a company, a small business or a micro. I don't even call it a small business because I feel like that's puffing myself up. I've been calling it a micro business. I'm like a notch above just self-employed, but it's called Real Custom Training. And it's basically leadership and management development for companies. But my goal is to make it not as lame as everybody imagines it is when I say that it's leadership and management training for corporations. I do workshop facilitation. I have a program I run here in Putnam, and then I also go into companies and I have myself and a few subcontractors, other instructors that help deliver programming for me. So companies will work with us to do, maybe a 6 workshop series for their leadership team or their frontline supervisors. And part of my approach to teaching, I love bringing in outside sources that are kind of unexpected for people. So I'm always pulling leadership lessons from movies and TV shows, or I'll like to get to know from my workshop participants what some of their favorite movies are. So when we get to a point in a workshop where I know we can relate it to a movie, like if we're talking about conflict, we can talk about, oh, what's your favorite movie? All right, let's dissect the conflict in that movie. The same way you can dissect when you're in the workplace and 2 employees are screaming at each other in the hallway, you can kind of apply the same tools to it. So, and books are a big part of it too. So that was why when Sarah asked me what book I might want to talk about, there's a lot of books I use in my business, the traditional ones people might expect, like you might call them self-help books, but I decided to go for The Hobbit. It's a brain and a heart book for me. So yeah.
Classic. And Andy, what did you do your undergrad in? Was it in English?
My bachelor's degree is an English degree.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I've always been a reader, and especially when I was younger, I was really involved in the creative arts a lot. I have a video production certificate, and so I've worked in like film and television production and theater production, and I've done a little bit of journalism as a reporter, communications for a school. So I've always been doing reading and writing, and then it took a turn towards more kind of like professional writing. And I kind of dropped off on the creative side, except for reading fiction. I've always been reading fiction and watching movies, but that was partly why I picked English for my undergrad, because I was like, well, if I'm going to go back to school, because I was like 24, 25, I was like, it's got to be something I'm interested in. I know if I go for accounting or just I'll get eaten alive. So yeah, English for undergrad, and then organizational management for my master's, which is more directly applicable to what I do for a living.
I do think that you are pulling in that English degree through your use of film, television, books, pop culture, and being able to kind of like analyze a text and bring real life points out of it and apply them to real life situations. So
But you brought up a couple of times too, like you were a reader, like reading as an activity, whether it was a pastime or sort of like a stimulant in some way. And Sarah and I encounter a lot of really avid readers through the podcast. And we often kind of like marvel at some of these folks that we meet who are incredibly successful, major leadership positions, both professionally as well as personally, like in their communities, but super, super busy, like people with incredibly full schedules, yet still find loads of time to read, and sort of this like efficiency that exists in their life, sort of like the busier you are, the more efficient you are. And we were wondering if you had any like hot take on that in terms of your business training background, if there's like some sort of correlation between like that active reading and being stimulated by stories and books also sort of propelling you into efficient working and being a good leader.
It's interesting that you use the word efficient. I don't think of myself as efficient, despite finding the time to read. But I agree. I do know some people I think that would match that description more, like some
like your wife.
Yes, there you go. Like my wife. That's a great. You're spot on, Sarah. Yeah, Emily fits that to a T. For me with the reading, it's even like it's almost been more of like a mental health thing of like getting back to fiction. And so in that sense, Melissa, I have had to use like efficiency tools to find time for it, of literally trying to say, can I find 25 minutes a day to read? While at the same time also starting to question, geez, if reading in fiction is kind of like a spiritual booster for me, should I really be looking at it the same way I'm looking at running the business of like, can I find a 25-minute pocket for spirituality? It's like it doesn't seem to jive either. So I go back and forth between like, no, I got to carve time out for reading, and just, hey, I'll read when I read, and something's grabbing me. But your podcast actually, Sarah and Melissa, listening to the episodes I was listening to, and it kind of reinforced for me this recent thing I'm going through of like reconnecting to just my appreciation for reading and writing and kind of the creative arts.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think this idea of it being spiritual, I would say like it's a sacred space. Like my time for reading, I treat as like a sacred space. But it's very easy for that to get pushed aside because there are so many other necessary things that need to get done. But I have found that since I have been reading more, like I do feel better,
Same here. Yeah. I won't take my phone into the bedroom at the end of the night. I'm not preaching like I'm on my phone a shameful amount. This is like the only self-control I've established with it. But yeah, I'll plug it in, and so that's been my fiction time, is like getting in bed, and like you just said, Sarah, it's just I just feel better.
Yeah.
It's a good moment to segue into the matter at hand here. So, and I'm the best one to do it, because an ongoing joke about me is that there are some major gaps in my awareness of pop culture, books, movies. Basically, there are so many books and movies that someone like me, who has a master's in literature and, this podcast even, really should have watched and or read by now. And if I'm honest, I'm at this point just kind of avoiding them. Like, I feel like it's more me to have not read them than it would be me to have read them. So just out of spite, I'm just not.
That's
it's part of my identity. Everyone's assuming now that I haven't seen Jaws, which I haven't. So I'm not going to, because then it's just going to change the whole equilibrium of things. Like, I've never seen a Star Wars, but clearly I have watched Arrested Development like 6 times, start to finish. So,
and if you watched a Star Wars now, I don't think it's going to hit you the way everyone telling you to watch it, the way it hit. It's one of those things. If it didn't get you as a kid, and it doesn't have that special place in your heart, like me, when you go back and watch it, you're like, yeah, that was fine. That was a perfectly good movie, but I didn't fall in love with it.
Except when Baby Yoda came out and everyone was like, chatting up about that. I also have like severe FOMO. So I was just like, well, this sucks. Like, I wasted all this time just digging my heels in, not watching the Star Wars. And now I can't hang out with you in your Baby Yoda party. But another example is The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which I literally Googled what is the relationship between Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit before this, just to be sure. I knew they were affiliated, connected in some way, but I have just never read it. Knowing that I haven't, Andy, can you please provide just a brief summary of The Hobbit by J.R.R Tolkien?
Sure. So The Hobbit is about a hobbit who's like a little person. It takes place in Middle Earth, so it's like a
fictional fantasy world.
Yeah. And so the hobbits, by nature of being small, they're small and quiet creatures, and they live a peaceful life. And the story is about a wizard named Gandalf who comes to Bilbo Baggins' home and has decided that he's going to recruit Bilbo to assist a band of 13 dwarves who are working with Gandalf to go back to the Lonely Mountain, their ancestral home where they had a kingdom inside the mountain, and they were ousted from their kingdom by Smaug the dragon. And so now Thorin, the leader of the dwarves, Thorin Oakenshield, he's got a band of 12 dwarves, and they've got Gandalf, and they need a burglar. So that's why Gandalf goes to the Hobbit, because hobbits are small and quiet, and they get Bilbo in. So it's basically about, the Hobbit's nature is to avoid adventure. Bilbo says, like, adventures, nasty things make you miss your dinner or make you late for dinner. Like they're all about the comfortable life. And like they all, the hobbits in the Shire where they live, they don't like Gandalf. Like Bilbo does, but most of them consider Gandalf a troublemaker. So it's about Bilbo getting plucked out of his comfortable home and going off on this adventure to slay a dragon. Yeah, so it's just about that journey for Bilbo and his willingness to go on an adventure despite his nature maybe telling him not to, about how it changes him, and I think it's about how he grows as a result.
Definitely. And Melissa, I've never taken you for a fantasy lover, because even, going back to like pop culture and A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, you never partook in that, right?
I watched a little bit of Game of Thrones when it came out, probably like the first season or two, but it kind of fell off for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was going to be my question for you, Melissa, is if you had read and loved anything sort of like The Hobbit adjacent. If you said, "Oh, I love Chronicles of Narnia,"
right, then
I might say, "Oh, then you really should read The Hobbit." Like, I think you would like it. But yeah, if fantasy hasn't been your thing, although I guess, it's not even really my thing, despite like I love The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but I didn't think I would. And I have since made sure my oldest daughter loves them. I've told her before about this kid, Dan, in high school, who I remember telling me he was so excited to go see Return of the King in theater. And I remember at the time, like, I was nice to Dan, but people were not. He was someone who got picked on. And I remember thinking, like, poor Dan, like, what a nerd. Like, that's what he's into, this, like, and if I ever see Dan again, I'll tell him, as I've told my daughter, like, I look back and kick myself so much. I'm like, no, Dan was open to something that now means so much to me. And I'm like, and I was too cool for school. Like, I could have been into Lord of the Rings sooner, but I was closed off to it because I didn't think it was for me. So I'm so glad I gave it a shot a few years later. But yeah, fantasy's not, I can understand if you don't like a genre, then you're less inclined to take a shot at a book in that genre.
I actually attribute it to, I find it very difficult to visualize. So I don't know what kind of reader that makes me, or what kind of like a learner or thinker that makes me. I don't necessarily think I'm a visual learner, because I like to read long fiction. But I like when they start talking about creatures that I can't quite create an image of in my mind, I just get a little bit lost. Like, I get too fixated on, like, so where's their ear again? Like,
oh,
so they're super tiny, but like, how tiny? Like, can they hold a cup? Do they have tiny cups? Like, I would get really over focused on like their size, just because. But maybe he does a fantastic job of explaining that. Maybe I need to give this Tolkien guy a little more credit.
You made me realize they give me a little push towards whatever the thing looks like, and then my mind fills in the blanks, and I just go from there. I never actually stop to like really think about, what I'm picturing, is that exactly what they're laying out?
And we have the benefit of all the movies have been out now too, right? So you can kind of use that as a bit of a guide. So how are you using this in your work? Like, you said that you reference it sometimes in your classes.
There's other things that I've incorporated into the classes. The Hobbit is one that I'm kind of developing now. And so, like, one idea I had is I do a podcast for my job called Better Work Days. So I'm working on an episode called Self-Care for Hobbits. And it's a little bit, of like a personal account of how I've kind of adapted self-care practices that are Hobbit inspired.
Two breakfasts? Don't they famously eat two breakfasts?
They do, yeah. They love food.
They do.
Basically, like a couple years ago, I would notice if I was thinking like, this is Hobbit stuff, like this is Hobbit stuff right here. Like
growing a garden.
Growing the garden, exactly. Sarah, when our friend Zach's got married, his bachelor party was just riding four-wheelers through all these fields and forests in Pomfret. We were going through a field and it was dusk and there were all these fireflies going off. I remember thinking, like, Hobbits didn't have four-wheelers, but they would think this is awesome. That might have been the first time I was like,
four-wheelers be? This would drive me crazy.
Yeah, it never crossed my mind. So since then, yeah, I've tried to pay attention to like, there's a lot of stuff that I like that Hobbits would be into. Like there's one, describing his hallway, and it describes how there's rows of lots and lots of pegs on the wall for hats and coats, and that the Hobbit was fond of visitors. And that's something like even I've been working on, where I get like super anxious having people over the house, yet I still like visitors. So I've even been trying to get more comfortable with just like, okay, have people over, whether it's perfect or clean enough or good enough, like just do the Hobbit thing of like have a comfortable home. And it's about having people into it and engaging with them and talking to them more than having a prim and proper place. The parallel to the workplace to me is that, the Hobbit goes off on this big grand adventure, and sometimes everyday people, which to me, the hobbits represent the like salt of the earth, everyday people. And you don't always get those chances to go off on big grand adventures, but I think the chance we all get is chances to get outside our comfort zone, step away from the things that sometimes the things that we truly love and rely on. Like throughout the book, they mention that, you know, in some of his lowest moments, they'll say the Hobbit was thinking of the tea kettle back home about to whistle. So he goes off this adventure, but he's still drawn back to the comforts of home. And so sometimes with people I work with in our workshops, you know, it might be the adventure they get offered is, hey, do you want to go for this promotion? Or there's an opportunity over here, but maybe this opportunity you have would require you to report to the board of directors once a month, and the person's terrified of public speaking. You know, they might say no to that opportunity because they're just scared of a certain aspect of it, a certain skill they would need to develop in order to do it. So a big part of what I talk about in our programs is, you know, figuring out when you're saying no to something for kind of the wrong reasons. Sometimes a wrong reason can be that there's some growth it would require of you and you'd have to get out of your comfort zone. But just like Bilbo, you know, you can go and say yes to it, and it might be difficult, but it'll be worth it in the end.
That image of the tea kettle. I love how I think we all kind of went like, you know, or everyone kind of smiled and nodded. Like, just all you need is that, like, just something to spark that, like, oh, the tea kettle. And you're immediately like thinking of your nan, or you're thinking about having a cup of tea or some sort of warmth or some sort of moment. It sounds like that book does such a nice job of sort of like igniting those things in people, like in a very simple way. And it puts me in mind of, and brace yourselves, I'm going to butcher this word. It's something like hygge.
Yeah,
I think it's Norwegian or something. And it's like basically just the word for like stuff that makes you feel good at home, and like ways that you can convey that, like giving someone a loaf of bread that you've made after they come visit you, or like sitting with really comfortable socks and a cookie. But it made me think about it when you were talking about, like, I need to just create a domestic space where I just am comfortable having people so that they can kind of contribute to the energy of that space, and then I can feel comfortable in it too. I'm not really sure where I was going with that in terms of a question, but it just sounds like I don't even have to read The Hobbit. I'm already getting a lot out of it.
Yeah, and I think an important part of The Hobbit too is that he returns to that comfort. I'm not like a Tolkien expert, but I think he rejected the notion that he was writing allegorically about World War I, which he was in. But whether it was intentional or not, it fits. You know, the story's about getting swept into this adventure, kind of like a young person going off to war and seeing terrible things, and then hoping and praying maybe you'll get back to that kettle someday. And then when you do, you probably have a deeper appreciation for it. And you're not necessarily, that adventure was good and you grew, but you're not looking to go do it again. You know, for me, I like it too, because there's like an alpha approach to leadership stuff I see. Like I saw, what's his name? I think it's Ryan Holiday, the Daily Stoic guy. And I like him, but he's like a big influencer in that space. And he had a thing the other day that said something like, comfort is your enemy. And I agree in the sense that, like, you can't learn and grow if you're not willing to get out of your comfort zone. But there's so many people that make it like a one or the other, it's either you're too comfortable or comfort's your enemy. It means like, no, it's just like Bilbo. Like, you need both. Sometimes you need to go on the adventure to grow, but that doesn't mean you reject comfort and treat it like your enemy. How do we treat enemies? We fight them. We defend ourselves against them. Of course we're stressed out. Of course we're burnt out. Of course we feel like we're not good enough, because there's these mantras out there saying like, yeah, comfort's your enemy. So anytime you seek comfort, which humans have to do, there's going to be part of you being like, oh, you're soft. You're not tough enough. You know, it's just silly stuff like that. So even in that sense, I like The Hobbit, because it's about how much we need comfort and how important comfort is, but that at times there's going to be, out of necessity, the need to step away from it. And if you do, you'll likely grow and change in ways, but you're going to want to come back to that comfort.
I saw in my feed today that Jeff Bezos sends out these memos to people and encourages them, saying, you should come to work terrified every day. I want everyone to come to work terrified. And it's that same kind of messaging, right? Like, be afraid or be nervous or anxious, and allow that to propel your work.
Jeff Bezos is the dragon in The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Because dragons hoard gold. Mm-hmm. And so that's like the dragon telling the village people, like, Oh, it's good you're terrified. Meanwhile, it's living like as comfortable a life as it can. Yeah, I hate the influencers in leadership development spaces who prop up the Jeff Bezoses of the world.
Thinking about The Hobbit and thinking about this whole idea of, I guess, the tension between like comfort zones and going out for an adventure. Like, I think what we're ultimately saying is like two things can be true at the same time. And for Bilbo, those comforts of home, he holds on to the thought because there's peril. Like, there's many times throughout their journey where, I mean, they are in danger of dying, you know, whether it's trolls attacking them or whether they're captured by elves that are not super friendly and they have to figure out a way to escape. There's so many different things, giant spiders in a forest. But I feel like there was one scene where I think it might have been the spider scene where they're in a forest and they end up having to climb trees to get up.
Yeah, they climb the trees to get away from the it's
Spiders?
goblins riding
Oh,
wolves.
goblins. Okay.
Yeah. And they set
Thank you.
fire to the trees, and the eagles pick up
Yeah.
Bilbo and the dwarves and Gandalf and
But
whisk them
there's,
away.
I feel like there's a moment when they're in the trees and Bilbo is looking around and he can see like the landscape surrounding him. And he has this moment of appreciation of, if I had never left the comforts of my home, I never would have seen this. And even though I just came from this seriously scary thing that just happened, there's also beauty in it too. But then later on, as things get more and more and more perilous, and you know, they actually get into war, there's war that happens at the end of The Hobbit. It's a motivating factor, right? He wants to get home. He has to survive so that he can get home.
Mhm.
And he has to rely on his resources and be crafty and be stealth and, you know, utilize the perks of being a hobbit to be able to get to where he really wants to go, which is home, because that ultimately matters more to him than anything else. That home that he has is precious, and no pun intended. And
Oh yeah,
worth
that went over my head,
returning
Sarah.
to. Yeah. I am a lover of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, have read the books. I actually even have Silmarillion
Oh,
right
nice.
here, which I read and actually still have notes that I wrote on it because it was so complicated and hard to understand that I had to take notes so I could, because everybody had like 15 names and they'd be referred to like as one of their 15 names, like all throughout the book. And I'd be like, wait, what, who are they again? But it holds a special place in my heart for sure. And so I don't want to talk too inside and too niche with this, but I could, because I definitely am a lover of both The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. And it is funny how you get introduced to things, because even The Hobbit, I didn't read The Hobbit when I was a kid, but there was an animated version that I loved as a child, like probably started watching when I was maybe like 7. And parts of it really terrified me, but I loved it. It was one of those Rankin and Bass productions.
Did they do the Lord of the Rings
They
animated
did.
movies too?
Yeah, Rankin and
Okay.
Bass did a Lord of the Rings too. I never ended up getting into that, but The Hobbit, it was like a comfort watch when I was a kid. Even the scary parts, because they became familiar to me over time, oddly. And then I did read The Hobbit, but I didn't read the Lord of the Rings either until after I watched the films. I watched the first film in the movie theater when it came out, and then I read all of the books from there, and have just been kind of a lover of that world.
Andy, you said you had some passages from this book. You know, we'll start with
Yeah.
one, see where things go. Do you want to set it up for us?
Yeah. So, Sarah, you were mentioning. I wonder if this is what you were alluding to. After they confront the spiders in the woods, Bilbo ends up killing a spider by himself. So he doesn't have the dwarves. No one's there to help him. It's just him and this giant spider one-on-one. And it's the first time Bilbo really holds his own in a fight. He kills this giant spider. And then there's a passage where it says, somehow the killing of the giant spider, all alone by himself in the dark, without the help of the wizard or the dwarves or of anyone else, made a great difference to Mr. Baggins. He felt a different person and much fiercer and bolder in spite of an empty stomach, as he wiped his sword on the grass and put it back into its sheath. I will give you a name, he said to it, and I shall call you Sting. So, you know, and a note I have there is often tell people in workshops, the good and the bad thing about confidence is there's only one way to build it. And the one way to build it is to do the thing you're not confident about. So I feel like at this point in the story, it's showing for Bilbo, yeah, you've been brought along by these other folks. You're on this adventure, but it's only you who's going to actually grow. You are now more confident in yourself and your ability to take care of yourself and defend yourself and do things that you didn't think you could do. You're now more confident about that because you did it. It's only you can do it. And that they highlight that later too in The Hobbit, where Bilbo's alone in a tunnel and he's going to approach the dragon, and he has just seen the red glow. Like, it's undeniable. There's a dragon waiting for him at the end of this tunnel he's walking down. And it says that it was at this point Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous things that happened afterwards were as nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. So again, I feel like there it's showing that whatever you're trying to do, it's ultimately it's going to be on you. And sometimes even the people you see doing these great, big, spectacular things that look scary, it's a nice reminder. No, probably the scariest thing they did was commit to doing that scary thing. It's the actual commitment and the decision to engage that's truly the scary and brave thing to do.
Yeah, that anticipation. It's funny, like I always think about Stephen King. I love Stephen King's writing, and he has a book literally called On Writing. And one of the things he says even about like scary moments, what is the most horrifying part of a book or a scene or is before you've seen the monster. You know, it's the anticipation. It's what's happening in your mind leading up to the confrontation that is the most terrifying part. And so it just like in Jaws, even though Melissa, you won't get this because you haven't seen Jaws.
never read a Stephen King novel either. I'm
Oh
a
my
real
God.
fly on the wall of this episode.
Oh, Melissa.
I know.
But Steven Spielberg purposely did not show the shark. It was always the music, the fin, blood in the water, like, but not showing it. It was only like really towards the end when you actually see like the shark itself. And it's just what goes on in your head and how you're imagining that shark is more terrifying. Just like Bilbo in that tunnel being like, am I going to do this? Because once you're out of the tunnel, you're out of the tunnel. You're doing whatever you need to do. Like the dragon's right there and you're going to have to face him. But like to get yourself to leave the tunnel, to get yourself to leave the Shire, that's the brave moment and the brave decision. So Andy, would you say that The Hobbit by J.R.R Tolkien is a could read, a should read, or a must read?
It's so hard to answer.
I know.
I have thought about it, but I give this answer all the time in my workshops. People ask they'll say like, how do I get an employee to show up on time every day? And it's like, well, it all depends. And people at the beginning, people can get frustrated with that because they think, well, you're the teacher, you tell me. And it's like, well, really, let's break it down. What time are they supposed to be there? What time are they getting there? Have you talked to them? Does their car work? What approach have you already taken to get them there on time? Why are they having trouble getting there on time? What's their state? So even with this, I'm like, it depends. Who am I talking to? Who am I recommending it to? So
Melissa.
To Melissa,
Mm-hmm.
I think you should read it, Melissa. I think you should because from the episodes I listened to, I liked with you two that you're open to trying the stuff that you're not sure you're gonna like. The smut episode was very enlightening.
I'm sure it was.
Even I was like, you know what? Oh, maybe I should read a smut book.
And I think maybe at the very least, maybe that could be a family read. Maybe like the four of you read it together. And I mean, unlike the Lord of the Rings, which is like exhaustively long, The Hobbit isn't.
And The Hobbit it's more of a kid's book.
It is a kid's book.
It was like a young adult, but even young adult might be a little bit advanced.
This is talk about nerds. Tolkien was a linguist. And so a lot of what he put into writing The Lord of the Rings in particular was that he developed languages. So there are full languages, like Elvish is a language. There's the language of Mordor. There's
the runes.
There's
the dwarf. There's a dwarf language in it.
And then the songs on languages. Like then he developed them and then he wanted to build like a culture around them. Tolkien was a really fascinating guy, but the idea that he just wrote The Hobbit as like this little bedtime story for his kids, and then was like, well, what else could I do?
Yeah.
Andy, this has been awesome. I'm like so glad to meet you. You know, this is a little bit of a departure. Like we normally just like sink our teeth into the book and we're just so all about the pure fiction of it all. You're just spreading that net, like just seeing where fiction can kind of be used in every facet of people's lives. And I love that use of it. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. I've really enjoyed this chat. And yeah, to all our listeners, switch on over to Better Work Days now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thank you.